Eventually does. Okay, we're live. As I normally announce at the beginning of our episodes, we are live. Um, Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, whatever it might be, where you are in your neck of the woods. We're here for another episode of Self-Care is My Job. It's been a minute. I took some time off over the winter, had to slow my roll, had to slow my ass down, had to get myself together, and quite honestly, just keep my head above that waterline of like between the seasonal depression and
I
the
feel that.
freezing friggin' cold and just wanting to be under the covers all the time. But I'm back and it's springtime and we're feeling good. And as usual, I have an awesome guest joining me on the show. So this is Ellie Diaz, and I'm going to have her introduce herself real quick for whoever's listening and doesn't know who the hell I am. I'm Samantha Long. I'm a yoga instructor and a self-care mentor for moms. And on this show, Self-Care is My Job, we talk about real deal self-care, not, your pedicures and your manicures and your bottles of wine and so on and so forth. We talk about the stuff that is really going to help you improve and enhance your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness as a whole. And some of it even gets ugly, and that's okay because discomfort is part of the game here. So just throwing that out there, and I'm really passionate about helping moms, which is what guided me to connect with Ellie. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself now. Tell us where you're from, tell us what your day-to-day looks like, and tell us about Goddess Mama Collective.
So, thank you so much, Samantha. I'm really happy to be here. So, as you already said, my name is Ellie, and I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is kind of a random place in the middle of the map. I actually am originally from California, but I've been living here for most of my adult life. So, California is kind of a distant childhood memory at this point. But I am just so passionate. I had some real struggles with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. I really struggled with like a germophobia set of anxiety. So I like had major anxiety letting anybody touch my daughter, letting anybody help me, anybody else coming into my house. It was just really, really difficult for me. And I found myself in a really dark place. And I think you hear it very across the board when somebody says, right before I went through spiritual awakening, I was at rock bottom. And so that's kind of where I was at. I was at rock bottom. I was just profoundly unhappy, even though the message that I was receiving was that I should be happy. I should be savoring all of these precious moments with my little love. And everybody was telling me how fast it's going to go by. And of course it does. But in the moment, I was just I didn't even want to think about the future. I was just trying to survive every single day. And I did not have so my mother, I'm the youngest of 7 children. So my mom raised a lot of kids, and she also was raised very religious. So we were a Catholic family, attended church very regularly. And it wasn't like something that was said to me, but it was just kind of this overall understanding that a mother is supposed to be a martyr.
Mm.
She's somebody who sacrifices herself, and that is the greatest duty that she has, and that's what makes her like. I was taught about martyrs in my church school, and it was like these people who sacrifice themselves, and therefore they're like the best people ever. And so that was kind of that mentality that like the more you sacrifice and the less you take care of yourself and the less you love yourself, then the more you are giving to other people and the better of a person you are. And so I really felt that. I felt like I had to do everything myself. I didn't even want to ask my husband for help. I wanted to, do everything around the house, everything for my daughter, so that when my husband came home, he was this, perfect. He came home to this perfect home, this perfect baby, this perfect wife. Like that was just what I was raised seeing. And yeah, it was a really challenging season for me, and I'm really happy that I was kind of able to come out to the other side of that. It actually started when I read a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Dispenza, and absolutely changed my life. I hadn't read a full book like probably since I was in school. Reading wasn't really my thing. And so I downloaded Audible and I got this book and I devoured it, and it just changed my life. I was like, no wonder I'm so miserable when this is like the version of myself that I'm putting out into the world. Like, this makes so much sense. And that kind of just opened the doors. I just started reading and consuming and researching. And I went through this complete cleanse of my social media and deleted every single account I was following that did not fit into this like positive world that I was trying to create for myself. And I think that was really helpful. I also took some time off of social media, which is something I always recommend to people, because I think that as moms, especially new moms and just, moms that are really struggling with that motherhood, is we just get consumed in, whether it's your breastfeeding or you're just sitting next to a sleeping kid, we spend so much time scrolling on our phone. I don't think that we realize exactly, what the quantifiable amount is, but so much of that first year I spent on my phone consuming the content of other people that just made me feel worse and worse about myself. So all of that kind of journey led me to, I just had this sense like I am supposed to create like community, was just the message that I was receiving. And I actually started by creating a generalized mom group for people local. And the message that I kind of put out there was, I want to create kind of that village, helping other moms and connecting. And it grew pretty well. I think we have like 150 people, and I actually do it with a friend of mine, but it was very non-specific to any belief system. And so there's a lot of moms in the group who are, have their different religious beliefs. And it wasn't a space where I felt comfortable. It was more like that surface level, shallow connection with people. And I really wanted people that I could go deep with. I wanted that like soul sister connection, people who could understand truly what the depth of what I was trying to say. And so that's what led me to create the Goddess Mama Collective. And so we have over 100 members now, and most of it's done on a Facebook group, but we do have a website, which is goddessmamacollective.com. And we've had like in-person meetings and Zoom meetings. And the first in-person meeting we had was like, I don't even know how to explain it, truly spiritual and magical. And everybody who came said the same thing. Like, this was such a magical time. We just like bared our hearts to each other. Like, here's these women sitting across from us that we've never met, don't know anything about them other than that they fit into this kind of niche of spirituality. And everybody was, saying things that they haven't even said to anybody else, like sharing secrets that have been on their heart, and thoughts and feelings that they haven't had a safe space to share. And lots of tears were shed, and it just really validated that this is like, I am doing something so important here. Moms need a space. And there's so many groups of spiritual women. I'm in lots of them on Facebook. And it's really hard sometimes because motherhood is such a specific journey that you really do not understand until you're in it. And I think that's such an important piece. I really wanted it to be for mothers specifically, so that they can feel seen, so that their needs are validated, their struggles are validated, and just a safe space where we can talk about all the things that fit under that huge umbrella. So I talked a lot just there, just kind of went on a tangent, but yeah, that's just kind of a little bit about me and how I got started.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. No, I mean, never apologize for going on a tangent, because you're about to find out just how often I do that. But I thank you as well, because you gave such a beautiful overview of not only like, your purpose in doing all of this, but the why behind it. And I think it's important. That's the most important piece, because there's, inevitably going to be other women and mothers who hear this and go, that is my experience. Yeah. That,
Mhm.
and specifically what was coming up for me was like, not they're, they'll say to themselves, that is my experience. And I don't feel like I have anyone that I can really divulge that to fully,
Yeah.
especially, and this is the thing, right? Is that you have, and not to say that one way of living is bad or good, right? But you do have a different approach to motherhood when you're living consciously and in awareness.
Mhm.
And again, not good or bad. It's just a matter of how deeply connected and embedded your trauma is, or on what level have you become conscious of your trauma and conscious of your unconscious belief systems and the
Mhm.
way in which you just go about life, like you had said about the book you read, based on sort of this persona that's really handed to us, like this is the roadmap, right?
Mhm.
And it isn't, just like everything else. This is not a one size fits all, fit in the fit in the box game. Everyone is different. We're even, realizing that now in all of the new science surrounding like neurodivergence, like as far
Mhm.
as the simple fact, and that basically just means like how everybody's brain works differently. Even when you look into that, so before we get into the motherhood side of things, you just look into an area such as that, where it's coming to the understanding, not only when it comes to gender, but when it comes to simply like how our brains work, everyone is freaking different. And it's funny, right?
Mhm.
Because we have been taught that concept for many years now. I mean, that was when me and you were coming up. I'm not exactly sure how old you are. I tend to think I'm a little bit older, but the point is that, we've been taught everyone's different for the longest time, but what goes into the action of taking that into account when it comes to allowing us to live as our true, full expressed self, none of that is really allowed yet socially.
Mhm.
We're
So
still
true.
expected, and now we can get into the motherhood side of it when you drum down to, okay, so you're gonna be a mom and this is how things are supposed to be. It's again, sometimes it is taught flat out, like word for word, as you were describing, but sometimes it's just about what was modeled to you. And that's kind of like a part of your trauma, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like I'm always somebody who talks about sort of embracing your experience, like it's a part of you. It isn't, it's not, some attack on you. It's just a
Mhm.
way in which we are still living based on false narratives that we can have control over. We can regain control over. So, when it comes to motherhood, what you were describing, which I thought was so eloquently put and beautiful, like you're describing this like playbook, right? That we're kind of handed, whether it is subliminally or very directly, handed this playbook. And the biggest thing, yes, is the self sacrificing, is the
Mhm.
fact that as soon as you put yourself first, you are somehow categorized as selfish. That there are, standards after standards that are not seen in any other, that are not, we're not, that are not expectations for any other group of human besides mother.
Mhm. Yep.
As far as, again, not prioritizing yourself, prioritizing other people before yourself. Um, Even when it comes down to what we're supposed to look like, what we're supposed to sound like. And then you also have all of the added pressure because now we have all of these ways in which we're supposed to be prioritizing other people and not ourselves. However, we also have so much higher stress levels as far as, I don't even like to say the burden of what we have to endure and what we the responsibilities that we take on as mom, because I actually tend to think that, as female, beings, we have gifts and they do align with the nurturing and the
Yeah.
processing of emotion. And all of those things are gifts that we do have the ability to cultivate, and we do bring that to the table. And it is important to bring that to the table in motherhood. But it doesn't mean that we don't get to nurture ourselves.
Mhm.
Um this feels, I don't, it's a segue story, but I'm going to throw it in there and we can jump off from there. The other day I was in the supermarket, and this wasn't a mother, it was actually a father who was shopping with his two kids, and one was a very, very small child in the cart, and the other kid was probably like 7 or something like that, and he pushed the cart, and it didn't even like, wasn't even an issue, like was everything was fine, but just, kind of like a little clusterfuck with like another 2 carts, like for 1 second, like it was totally fine. Nothing happened. Me and the other woman like chuckled, like we were like, cute kid, right? And the father, I was standing in the store, like, crying pretty much because the father came over and gave his son a hell of a whack right on the ass in
Mm.
front of everyone. I'm like, and by the way, I'm in New Jersey. I didn't mention that to you. Like, just, not that it matters, but just like, like things are different in different areas of the world. Like,
Mhm.
let's just like put that, this is reality we're talking about. So
Yeah.
just, in the middle of Bergen County, New Jersey, like you're just coming over and just, smacking your kid straight off in public in the middle. And I'm not even getting into in this discussion like whether it's the father or the mother doing it or whatever, because in my experience was literally just sitting there and then also kind of like watching this father like totally like berate his son, like walking down like the rest of, the aisle.
Mm.
And I'm with my son who's 3 in the car, and I had to stand there. I just had to stand there and gather myself. Like I was frozen in time. I could not move. I had to shed some tears. I had to have a release. I had to stop myself from, like saying something that, I want to say, oh, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother discussion, right? But
Mhm.
it's just after having my release and having my sort of full somatic experience, right? The message was like, this is why, similar to you, I also feel drawn, and I'm a mother, so it's going to be regarding, the female partner, the mothers, why I feel the same urge to to hold space for
Mhm.
parents who are healing. Because as
Yeah.
much as I wanted to attack this man physically, Um, the reality of it is that this is all stuff that has as have used the phrase before, like trickle down trauma. Like this is what was modeled to him. And this is what was modeled to so many other parents, this way of dealing with your child, the inability to self-regulate before
Mhm.
reacting to your child. All of this, right? It's just a matter of what your capacity is based on what was modeled to you and what was taught to you and the playbook that was handed to you. And whether or not you are ready in your nervous system to become conscious of these patterns or not. And it
Mhm.
sucks because a lot of people are really just not ready in their nervous system or whether it's spiritually, right? To
Yeah.
actually see any of this for what it is. But, you know, just looking at that example, right? Like, do you think the guy felt great about what he was doing? No, he probably didn't, right? Whether it was a father or a mother or any, like you have this reaction, and then there's always the aftermath of it, right? And it's just a matter of whether you are ready to do something about it or not.
Mhm.
And again, not bad or good. It's really not. It's just a matter of what like and it really is. It's coming back to the connection, right? A lot of times I would say that 80% of whether you're ready to actually become conscious of these patterns and start your healing journey in order to affect so many other factors of your life, that has to do with what you are surrounded by every day and
It's so true.
who you are surrounded by every day. It is your
Mm.
circle, it is your family, it is society, it is so by people like me and you, Ellie, like actually starting to speak on these things and create spaces where we can have an open forum for these type of conversations and make it okay and not weird or strange in some way to start or like shameful even to start questioning things and old
Mhm.
patterns and past dynamics and stuff like that, to make it okay, because I think you and me can agree that especially in motherhood, to top off all these other do's and don'ts, the book of do's and don'ts, right? Top off all of those other ones, one thing that you're also taught that you don't do is question, this playbook and question what your, the way that the previous members of your family handled situations and
Wow,
stuff like
yeah.
that. So it's very hard, I think, for moms to come out of that box and start speaking on it. And again, if they don't have a circle where it's safe to do so, then speaking that truth is literally the biggest part of it. Having a platform or a forum to even say the words out loud is so
Mhm.
necessary. So I really
Yeah.
think
Wow. I
it's
have
worth
so many thoughts coming up as I'm hearing everything you say, like definitely resonating. I think like one of the huge differences between the way that my brain functions like post spiritual awakening is actually like judgment of others. And it used to be like, you see, I mean, I see this all the time. Like I live in Oklahoma and, just to say that like demographics do matter, but I see so often, like just the other day we were at the zoo and I probably counted like at least 10 parents like yelling, berating, just saying, being really unkind to their children for doing something that was just within the bounds of the child's natural curiosity. And like my heart hurt. And I know that like identifying myself before spiritual awakening, the thoughts would have been like, that's such a bad parent, like what an awful mom. Like, I can't believe that. They shouldn't even be a parent. Those sorts of like really judgmental thoughts. And whereas this time it was more just like deep sadness. Like it breaks my heart that they have not been exposed to what they need to be exposed to. Like that awareness has not developed yet. And one of the ways that I kind of regulate that sadness, because I think it can feel really overwhelming, especially like I'm a huge empath and I just like want to help everybody and fix everybody. And something that's been really like helped me to kind of tone down that like the way that it affects me personally is to just remember that people, I don't know about you, but my personal beliefs is that we chose, our soul chose to incarnate here on earth and chose the version of our journey in which we take. And I think that to just say, this is so sad, but you know what? This is the journey that they're meant to take. And, those children might be experiencing trauma. I'm sure all children, even children raised by the most, mentally healthy, spiritually awakened people, are bound to have some trauma. And so that trauma is their journey. And you have no idea what they're going to do with it. They could change the world just based on what that they experienced. So that's been something that I constantly kind of tell myself, because I do see that a lot and it really does like shake me to the core. Like I was so identifying with you when you said you just had to like sit there and collect yourself, because it's really hard to see that. So that's been something that I definitely try to tell myself. And then the other thing that I was just really feeling when you're talking is, it's definitely like that what you were talking about, these kind of like versions, this playbook that we have to live by. It is so, I feel like mom groups are so kind of counterproductive, and they really just like collide with themselves a lot, because there's this message like, you don't have the right to judge anybody else. Like, don't judge anybody, any other mom. Don't say anything to any other mom. But yet there's still judgment. And so it's just like this circulation of like, don't say what you think if it goes against what that person's doing, but like also don't do that and don't do this. And so like I have tried to say some things, in mom groups before, just like from a point of awakening, like not unkindness in any way. I think there was one post of a mom saying that her 4-year-old was, really rambunctious, and it was like really affecting her mental health because she couldn't handle like all the noise. And she was like asking if she could get her child on to like ADHD medication. And so I'm like, I can't not, so I'm not a person who can just scroll past and not say something. So I commented, this very nice comment, I completely understand that this can be really challenging if you have, sensory processing issues. And, I just urge you to, think about other options before putting your child on medication. This is probably just a manifestation of her personality. And, there's definitely some things that I could recommend to help with your nervous system, functional mesh rooms. I've heard of those loop earplugs that help to deafen sound. So I'm just like trying to, oh my gosh, I probably got 20 responses to my comment. Don't you come in here judging that mom. Like, you should be ashamed of yourself for mom shaming, like all of these sorts of things. And I think this is a real issue in society, because we have to surround ourselves with people who can hold us personally accountable. Accountability is such an important part of like just human expansion, because there are always going to be things within yourself that you can't see, because that's just the way that our brain functions. The ego protects us from seeing things that go against what, the voice that we have within ourselves, that conversation. And I think that surrounding yourselves with people who not only feel comfortable to express what they see, but also feel comfortable receiving that, constructive criticism is so important, because there's just always things that come up. And mom groups are one of the most, like, everybody in my group that I've talked to is like, oh, I hate mom groups, they're so toxic. And they really can be such a toxic place. And yeah, I just really want that environment of feeling safe to express your opinions, and also being willing to kindly receive other people's opinions, when obviously done in a way that's not like, screw you, you're a terrible mom. It's just like, hey, like, I see this and I care about you, and I just want to share with you my perspective, because what are we as a human existence if not interconnected with each other? And we have to be able to share that interconnectedness and raise each other up. We don't just ascend to the highest version of ourselves on our own. It doesn't happen. You have to surround yourself with people who are on that same journey, and as you grow together and you raise together. And we know, just based on science, that energy is compounded and is so much more powerful when there's multiple people involved. I think the manifestation is like 10 times just by having two people trying to manifest the same thing at the same time. And so having that collective energy is so, so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. I mean, I, have 2 kids, 6 and 3, so it's been a good 6 plus years of me experiencing those mom groups, right? Or more, right? And, um, and it's interesting because I am, like, a very social person, so I felt, drawn to joining them early on and conversing and engaging within the groups and stuff. And as you were talking about it, I'm going, wow, it is so interesting how little I've gained from these groups. I even have, given how much I like to interact on a normal basis, right? And connection is one of my strong suits. It's one of my skills. Like, I can connect with anyone, I can talk to anyone. But I even had a close friend who we used to work together, and she's a Reiki master, and she had a group for a long time that was called, like, yeah, it was a moms group, and it was a local moms group, and she tried to use it as a platform to be like a mental health for mothers advocate, right? And it just grew actually to be so big um that it became the opposite. Like you were
Mhm.
explaining, it slowly and surely became a space for trauma bonding, and
Mm.
it's essentially what it is. I mean, so much of what you're gonna see in many of these groups is, um, for lack of a better phrase, bitching and complaining
Mhm.
about how hard motherhood is. It is hard. Nobody is arguing that. We're literally talking about that right now. But and there is a time and a space and a value to the venting in a way, right? But do you want to bond over cheap energy in your venting,
Mhm.
or do you want to evolve in some way from
Mm.
your speaking truth? It's
Yeah.
it's they're two different things. And there's two things at play, right? One thing at play is that we're taught trauma bonding. It's just the way that, um, many of us within our family units have actually been taught to engage with each other, actually. I can tell
Mhm.
you straight up right now that I'm, half Italian, quarter Russian, quarter Jewish. The Russian and or quarter Jewish. The Jewish side is Russian and Polish, and the Italian side is Italian. And my grandmother was from Naples, and my grandfather was from Ancona, Italy. So
Wow.
basically and as you could, we talk about demographics and culture and stuff like that. Things are different depending on where where your origins are from, but a lot of it is the same. But the Italian side, I will tell you from right off, I still have to stop myself and become conscious and aware of how I'm speaking. And this is, again, not good or bad, no blaming here. It's just how it is that there was a lot of trauma bonding and conversing and connecting over complaining, over
Mhm.
one-upping each other about how hard life is and how my struggle's harder than your struggle and so on and so forth. That was a lot of a huge piece of the conversation. And as much as I was, for part of it, a small child absorbing it, that is what you learn. That is modeled for you. So for much of even my adult life, especially before I became a mother, when I was in the corporate arena, it felt so natural to me to bitch and complain about not, forget before motherhood, right? Bitch and complain about how hard my job was and how this person didn't do their job and and it's like this loop. So it doesn't, you can apply this to anything because it's just simply across the board what many of us were
Mhm.
modeled and what we learned. So you take that into a mom group, and again, there's no evolving, there's no spiritual awakening, there's no learning experience, there's no growth, because we're just sitting in that fixed mindset area of just like, this is just the way it is, it's hard,
Mhm.
back and forth on a loop. So you have that's one side of it, is that sort of that stuck space that we get in. And yeah, it's the same, right? Until your nervous system is really ready for a change and feels comfortable going outside that unconscious loop of pattern of thoughts, and actions, there is no getting out of it. But a perfect way, which you mentioned already, is just simply, since we are talking about social media right now, is to decide very intentionally and deliberately what is serving you and what is not. So if
Mhm.
you are a mother listening right now and you're like, shit, yeah, like, how is this helping me grow? Think about leaving some groups or unfollowing some accounts.
Mhm.
100%. And then there's like a deeper level to it that was coming up as you were talking of, and I talk a lot about the nervous system because it's just like a major pillar for how I like to work with people, as far as how can you self-regulate and how can you co-regulate. So what we
Mhm.
are talking about on a broader spectrum right now is that co-regulation process. If we are engaging on, and this is exactly what your whole point was, right? Like creating a space where we can engage deeply on a more deep level and not on that top level, surface level, superficial bitching and complaining level. We want to connect on a deep level. I want to hold space for you to really let go and have the release that you so well deserve.
Yeah.
And when we do that, especially if we are both in exactly what you were saying, in a space of not only opening up and releasing, but the receiving end, that's true co regulation. So if we can co-regulate, then we can better self-regulate when we're in our home, when we're in our home space and our kids losing their fucking mind and there's shit all over the house and you got a sink full of dishes and your husband's grumpy or whatever the hell it is, right? When you're there, you have a better chance at your self-regulation and vice versa. If you're working on yourself and you're doing your inner work and you're working on your ability to self-regulate, whether that is in general or moment to moment basis, I have a better chance of being there for you when you need me, and
Mm.
the ability to co-regulate. So now we see the bigger picture of what really, and this isn't even about like a mom's group only. This is about literally every one of your relationships being a container for you to feel held and supported,
Mhm.
as opposed to feeling judged and
Yeah.
shamed and tense and tight, because that's not
Mhm.
what we want. And the last thing I'll say about your community and what, like, being very intentional about who you're co-regulating with, right? So we also, among other things, are modeled and taught the act of basically running from any element of discomfort. So when
Mhm.
you were talking about the person sort of attacking you for sharing your opinion, so when a person has their own stuff that they have a hard time self-regulating, again, not good or bad, but you will be triggered. A person will be triggered by something that you say. And because we're taught pretty much as a society under this patriarchal world that we're still facing in a lot of ways right now, that flow and that processing of emotion that's more of a feminine approach is shunned. And what
Mhm.
has been brought in is a very black and white approach. And that black and white, all or nothing approach is if this makes me uncomfortable, I am fighting. I am now in fight mode in my nervous system, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna fight your ass on it. Or I
Mhm.
might flight, right? I might just go, "Mm-mm, I can't deal," and I'm out, right? Um, so that level of discomfort, so many of us have a very hard time with that. You go into that very reactional phase because you are triggered. And so we can have compassion because we are in this healing journey and we are evolving in this way and becoming much more conscious of these things. We can have compassion for the person who is very triggered and then goes into that fight mode because they are not ready in their nervous system to have a constructive conversation about it. And they also aren't, and you basically said this in other words, they aren't going to reap the benefit of being able to receive that.
Mhm.
I don't even want to say advice. They're not in a space of receiving something that could be helpful. And a lot of times too, like I'll just give an example. It's not like I'm never triggered. Like I'm triggered all day. No, like, literally. And
Yeah.
by the way, real quick, I'm triggered specifically by my children all day. And,
Mhm.
just to be clear, because we're doing a lot of pontificating and we're doing a lot of, talking about being awakened and all of this, but it doesn't mean, at least from my perspective, speak for myself, right? It doesn't mean I have this down pat. It does not mean that I go through the whole day with a big grin on my face. Hell no. I am
Mm-mm.
triggered all the time. It's just a matter of whether or not I can take pause to consciously become aware of what is happening inside of my body and have a very deliberate and intentional moment for myself to decide if that's what I want or not.
Yeah.
And do I want to fight someone right now? No, whether it's through the internet or in person or whatever it is, and and but we are taught to have that type of response to any triggering and any amount of discomfort. So unfortunately, the person on the other end of that, yes, does not is not in a place of receiving what could potentially help them grow. The other part of it is that us on the other end not feeling triggered by that person's reaction to their trigger, because the truth is that if we feel that intuitive draw to drop something, as much as in many times I think it is important to wait for an invitation, and someone posting a question in a group is an invitation. So, that's an invitation for me to discern whether or not I have an intuitive piece of knowledge that feels like it's meant for you. And so if I feel that way, I can divulge that information to you and not be so triggered if your response isn't perfect, because ideally I have planted a seed somewhere
Mm,
inside of
yes.
you that your nervous system is not prepared to integrate right now, but it might be someday. And I can tell
Yeah.
you that that has happened to me, and I still talk about this all the time where I'm like, I don't, like anytime I go into like a bit of a judgment mode and catch myself, it's always like I'm going to eat my words one day about, even if
Mhm.
it was only some word thoughts in the brain that didn't even come out of the mouth. Like I'm going to eat my thoughts one day, because one day that person who said that I was like, I don't get it. Right? They planted that seed, and I'm not ready to integrate that belief system right
Mhm.
now, but one day I very well might be, and I'll be
Wow.
eating my thoughts and saying, "See, remember when I didn't get this? I didn't
Mhm.
understand this. I wasn't fully able to integrate this." And
Yeah.
we have to, so that kind of like opens the floor about like this patience that we have to have for ourselves. Like you're just like this evolve, like there is no like perfect game here.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of whether you want to live consciously or unconsciously, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Wow. Yeah, the thing you said about planting a seed is so interesting that you just said that, because I literally had that conversation with my husband a few days ago. Like, just because you don't, like, something goes in one ear and out the other doesn't mean it didn't leave a trail. And
Yeah.
you have no idea how important that trail is going to be in the future. And my brother actually was kind of more interested in this sort of like spirituality before I was. And I remember thinking, like, he's wacko. Like, I don't know what he's doing with his life right now. And now that I think about it, I think that when I was going through my spiritual awakening, it wasn't a conscious thought, but more of a subconscious, like, you know what? Like, I've seen somebody close to me do this before, and this is like safe, you know? So I
Yeah.
think that just having a little bit of, kind of a taste of what somebody else is doing can then come back later and be an important part of your journey. So I love that you said that. And another thing that I really wanted to touch on is when you were talking about the complaining, because I think that it's so interesting how complaining is such a part of the way that our society functions. I mean, that's the root of marketing, really, is you're looking for somebody's complaint so that you can fix
Yeah.
it. And so it's just like
It's not
perpetuated
even just
nonstop.
from, like, what you're taught growing up. It's programmed in us
Uh-huh,
to hate our
everywhere,
fucking
everywhere
lives.
on the internet. Yeah, and it's so interesting because what you focus on expands. So if
Mhm.
you focus on feelings of discontentment and, "Oh my gosh, like, this is," when I thought that motherhood was so hard, like, when that was the thought in the forefront of my mind, it was at its hardest. That's not a coincidence, because what you focus on expands. If your life is miserable and having a kid is so hard and I hate everything and don't, I just wish that, this was so easy, that's what's going to be your life. Your life is going to be hard. And I think that, no, it's fortunately it's something that's being brought into awareness a little bit more, but not nearly enough, that you have to stop focusing on the bad and focusing on the good, focus on the joys in your life. Look at this little soul that chose you. They chose you to be their mother, you specifically, because you have something to offer them that nobody else in the entire world can. And for any mothers listening, I highly recommend the book Spirit Babies. It is an amazing conversation over, it's like specifically for how you can communicate with your unborn child. But I'm not pregnant right now, and I'm still reading it because it's just such an interesting conversation about, like, where your child's soul came from and why they chose to incarnate into your life and into, you have you as their parent. So I highly recommend that book. But yeah, it's just, I really wish that more people had that conversation. How can you look at the beauty in life as opposed to all of everything that's wrong? Nothing out there is going to fix your life problems. No amount of posting, complaining in a mom group, no, buying of this or buying of that is going to fix what you're going through. It is the mentality shift that you make that truly changes your life, and the way you look at the beauty in everyday moments. And yeah, I also think that on the other side of spirituality, like you said, it's like this, oh, well, um, it's, we don't have it down. Like, I also too am triggered by my child all the time, and I view triggers as like a question. It's like, hey, that affected you for some reason. Maybe you should try to figure out why that affected you. And I also, like, for example, one thing for me is I really struggle to play with my daughter. And I felt like such a bad mom for so long because I was like, why? Like, I don't like playing with her. It's really hard for me to get in that zone of like enjoying what we're doing together, because it's just like more of like, I gotta play with her today. And I realized after a little bit, it's because I wasn't played with. None, my parents, I was played with by my siblings, but my parents kind of just, well, here's a sibling to play with because I have other things to do. And my dad traveled all the time. I hardly ever saw my dad. And my mom was busy raising 7 kids. So she didn't have a lot of time to play with me. And no wonder it's not natural for me because it wasn't a natural part of my childhood. And just being, like you said, just making that choice to be conscious about the things that affect you and to be conscious about why you're triggered about something that you're triggered about, and just taking that time to breathe together. And probably the single most important thing that I've done as a mother is breathing with my child. And this has like completely transformed my parenting because not only am I teaching her a healthy emotional regulation technique, I'm also giving myself a chance to think. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with a toddler, things are like boom, 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 like everything's fine. And then all of a sudden they're on the floor crying. And you're like, I don't even know like what just happened. Like I'm so stressed out right now. And just saying, okay, let's breathe. Let's take a few breaths together and then we can assess the situation. It forces them to, like, not forces them, but it causes them to stop crying if they're present in the breath. They're taking a break from the crying. And this is not like, let's breathe and then you'll stop crying. This is like, let's breathe. And then I'm sure when you're done breathing, you'll start crying because the feelings are still there. But I had a moment to calm my own body so that I can take a chance to connect with you. And that is such a simple thing that has been so important in my parenthood that I really wish everybody would just try to apply to their lives. And I didn't do it for, the first part of my journey as a mother. I probably started doing it when she was like, maybe a year and a half, I want to say, is when I really started implementing it. And now she'll, like, if she's frustrated about something she's doing on her own in a different room, I'll hear her go, take deep breaths, and then she'll just or if she's playing with a stuffed animal and her stuffed animal falls, she'll pick it up and go, take a deep breath. So it's really that. And one of my favorite sayings is, I don't know if I read this somewhere or if it came from my brain, honestly, so I apologize if I'm not giving credit to the right person, but it's, children do what they see, not what you say. Actually, I know I read that somewhere, but I just kind of came to me one time, and I repeat it to myself all the time, because you could sit down every day for an hour and tell your child exactly how to be a good person, but if that's not the way that you're living your life, that is not who they're going to become. You have to implement all of the changes that you want to see in your children. First, if you see something wrong with your child, like, why is my kid doing this, why are they acting out in this way, first examine yourself, because you are the ultimate mirror. They are the ultimate mirror to yourself, and vice versa. Your children are literally mini yous in every sense of the word, not just in the way that they look. And I definitely think that, for anybody listening who doesn't know, this is really interesting, but children actually are in a state, they're in I want to say a beta theta brainwave state from 0 to 7. They are literally being hypnotized by the entire world. That's the state of mind that we're in when we're in hypnosis and in sleep. And so everything that your child absorbs in the first 7 years of life is imprinted into their subconscious. And that's not to scare you. If your children are past 7 or they're halfway through that, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just gives you the knowledge. Knowledge is such power. And I think that's what I really, going back to like that whole mom group, when you are able to share this knowledge with others and help others to understand it. And one of the girls that is in our group, she said at the, in-person meetup, she's like, I actually don't know very much about this, but I really just felt called to this space. And I think that's such a beauty that we can just empower. It's empowerment of motherhood through knowledge and consciousness. That is the ultimate goal. It's not just about like, read this, do that, like, be this. It's empower yourself through your own consciousness. Here's some knowledge to help you take that, bring it into your life, and transform it in the way that works best for your family, so that you can be the, most conscious version of yourself, not necessarily the best version, because I think it's impossible to be the best version of ourselves. We can strive for that. But I love the way you said, like you said it, it's just a daily decision between unconsciousness and consciousness. And that is like at the root of it all.
Yeah. And it doesn't hurt to have support to do that, because as you were
Mm-hmm.
talking, I know especially I mean, all moms are working moms, but it's just a matter of things get hectic, things get busy. There doesn't there is there's something that happens where you don't feel space, right, for making
Mhm.
changes in your life. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "I am just so fucking inundated and overwhelmed that I can't even imagine making the time to and placing and having
Mm,
any extra energy to make a shift to slowing down and being more conscious, right? But that's just it, is that all, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, where do I begin? Like, where do I even begin to implement some of this stuff? I always just recommend slowing down. And obviously,
mhm,
being a yoga and meditation teacher, that goes hand in hand with mindfulness, right? you We hear so much about mindfulness this, mindfulness that, right? But you can simply think about being, adding some mindfulness to your day to day is just the way to get there is to slow down. And once we incorporate mindfulness, we can become more mindful, aware of what our triggers are, of what our patterns are that we might want to break and things like that. And mindfulness will allow that for us, but we cannot be mindful or aware of any of it until we slow down. So, like, that's my
mhm,
number one thing. And it was a long time coming for me. Like, I'm like this high achieving person, and a lot of that is just my personality that I adapted really
mhm,
through what was modeled for me and what I was taught was of value in this world, and so on and so forth, right? So,
mhm,
like, I actually, like, when I'm trying to drum down, like, the ideal client that I would like to work with, I actually do include that. I like to work with high achieving women, but the truth is that I wanna work with high achieving women because that means that you are in a space where you most likely feel that you need to be high achieving to be of value in this world,
mhm.
because that's very much my experience, and I struggle a lot with that. A
Yeah.
lot of struggling with slowing down. And because it has been such a major part of my experience, slowing down also requires you being okay with potentially being less productive, God forbid, in a day.
Mm.
Right? Like, and what would that say about me if I didn't achieve, anything in a day? Or if I didn't have some kind of tangible outcome to whatever I was supposed to accomplish that day or that week or that month or whatever. So there is a lot of releasing your control over outcomes. There is a lot of releasing what you always were taught, your trauma, uncoupling from a lot of trauma that's still living inside of you, that says that you have to do things and act a certain way. And so much of that is based on being in this high achieving, go do more, more, more mode. And it literally stops you dead if you are trying to incorporate more awareness, consciousness, and mindfulness in your life. You can't get
Mhm,
there. So that's why we incorporate things like, at least from my perspective, like yoga, meditation, breath work,
mhm.
you know, big eye roll. I know that I should be, meditating and things like that. But this is also why we also, you get to that point, well, how do I do that, right? Well, that's why we support each other. That's why me and you
Mhm,
are here to go, I'm here to support. So coming back also to that, like, co-regulation that I was talking about, we are not meant to do this alone. We are
mhm.
meant to do this in collectives like what Ellie is creating. We are
Yeah.
meant to do it either one-on-one or in groups, which is what I try to hone in on when I'm doing group or private coaching. We are not meant to go through this alone, especially when you are in the midst of trying to make shifts in your life, which literally throws you into discomfort, which we have been taught to run from.
Mhm.
Not only is it accountability, but it is that literal co-regulation that's happening
Yeah.
in the midst of a situation that you have not been taught to self-regulate in. in that
Mhm.
discomfort of change. And um but it is completely within the capacity, especially of us women who have these divine gifts of being able to flow, to sit down, to process emotion and actually experience the full arc of an emotion. Like, these are some of
Mhm.
our gifts that have been tamed. I can't get on this tangent because I won't stop. But um in other words, yeah, the point is that we have these gifts. It doesn't have to be as hard as it seems.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the only other thing that I wanna say, because you did such a good job of, like, making these recommendations and bringing it home in that way, which was so good and so important. Um, because we're talking a lot about, like, breaking cycles and stuff, and it could see and, how to parent and how not to parent and stuff like that, and man, it can seem like this major, like, behemoth to make these type of shifts.
Mhm.
You hear a lot about breaking cycles and how, like, women, mothers have to be just add another friggin' responsibility to our list of being
Mhm.
the cycle breakers and this and that. And yes, in a way, because of those gifts that I was just, talking about, in a way, we are the healers of our families, and it is in a way, I feel, in my opinion, meant to be that way in a way.
Yeah.
However, we have to be super kind and compassionate with ourselves. We are not
Mhm.
breaking every cycle and every pattern that hasn't served your family line and your lineage in one lifetime. You are not.
Yeah.
You're doing the work on yourself. Like, that's the minimum, right? Like, and it's enough. I don't even wanna say, like, "Oh, it's the minimum." It's enough for you to do the work on yourself, because doing the work on yourself will automatically
Mhm.
break so many cycles. It has to start with you. And
Yeah.
I've learned this actually the hard way. I have experienced many in retrospect, I can see the ways in which I've attempted to skip steps with the breaking of cycles, like wanting to, and it's that, like, masculine energy of wanting to reach out and control this thing that's over here,
Mhm.
control my child and their experience in life before I do that work on myself. And that is the biggest thing. Like, yeah, that your child is, and it's the beauty of motherhood. Your children are little mirrors for you, but and this was like the most beautiful thing that I was taught. I wanna say I was taught even in my yoga teacher training. I had this wonderful teacher who has, like, 5 children, and which is a lot in my opinion. Um, and, she would just drop all these parenting nuggets, right? And I swear I hadn't had anyone, and this is that co-regulation that I keep coming back to, and that holding space and being able to speak her truth affected me in a way that will never leave me, because she
Mhm.
would talk about how we can relinquish a lot of control that we want to have over who they're gonna be and who they are now and
Mhm.
how they're perceived and so on and so forth. And it's like, not only can you give yourself a little bit of space as far as being the one to fix all these issues in your lineage, but also relinquish a little control over who they're gonna be, because they're not
Mhm.
and this is something that I've actually said long before that. Your children are not like this, like, sculpture that you're, like, picking away at.
Mm.
You're not a sculptor. You're
Yeah.
not trying to create a work of art here.
Yeah.
You're just trying to hold space and co-regulate with them.
Mhm. Yeah,
You're
it's
just trying to
so
hold space
so
for
true.
them to be who they are, and
Mm.
feel safe and feel a sense of safety in their nervous system as much as possible, because it's not gonna be all the time. You're gonna there's danger. No matter if we
Mhm.
fix everything in this world, there's still danger in this world, and that's okay. That's a part of life. But yeah, we're not trying to fix everything for them and make them perfect. We can just put that down right now and give ourselves some space there, and then you
Mm.
take whatever you can glean out of that space and that capacity and energy and put it on you and put it
Yeah.
back into yourself, because that's what really is going to show the most impact for sure.
Yeah, that's so true. One of the things that I've said before is that we spend so much time, like, obviously as a mother, like we would literally die for our children. Like we would give anything for them. And I think that like just intensity of feeling is really easy to translate into your everyday life. But your job is not to give everything to your child and sacrifice everything for your child, even though you would. Your job is to, like you said, take care of yourself so that you can be the best version that you possibly can be, always wanting to be better, always growing. You're teaching them that that's what life should be. Life should be about growing. It should be about expanding. It should be about finding yourself, about, loving yourself and taking care of yourself. And something that I really wanted to say, just because of the nature of your podcast, Self-Care is My Job, something that I've really been thinking about lately about self-care is, because in the beginning, I was thinking this in the beginning when you said, not fake self-care, like, pedicures and facials. Real self-care is having a relationship with yourself like you would with somebody else that you love. And I think that is so important. And about the like making this kind of all ties in together, because I think that a lot of times I've heard this dialogue is, I just don't have time. I don't have time to
Mhm.
do that. First of all, remove that verbiage from your language. I don't have time is not a real thing. You do have time. You're just not prioritizing it. And that's okay. You don't have to feel bad about it. You just have to make it a priority. So I was like in this zone of stress, like, oh my God, I need to do things for myself. Like I need to, meditate and do yoga and stuff, but I just don't have the time. Like, how can I find the time? And I made time. Now I go to bed. I'm in bed by 9:30 and I wake up at 5:30 every morning and I go for a morning poop, which is important for me to do in peace. Nobody talks about that, but that's important for me.
Mhm.
And I do my Spanish lesson. And then I peacefully, before anybody else is awake, well, my husband will go off to the gym and my daughter's still sleeping. I do my meditation. I do my yoga. I have that time for myself. Is it like, would I love to sleep in? Yeah, sleeping isn't fun. But you know what? Like I made the commitment to myself that that's something I need. And I notice that when I don't do it, you know what? First of all, if I don't wake up early, yoga doesn't happen. Like
Mhm.
I don't like I'm using the verbiage I told you not to use, but it feels like I don't have time other times in my day. So find a time that you can commit to yourself and then treat it like you would treat a relationship with your child or your husband. Like I'm making time for this because I love you, because I care about you, because this is important,
Mhm.
not just like, oh, I don't have time to, go get a facial or go get a spa. And I think that mentality on social media is so warped, because that is not what self-care. Sometimes self-care is having a good morning poop by yourself,
Hell
as
yeah.
unglamorous as that sounds. So I wanted to say that I think
So
that's really
important.
important. And I love that you just said to slow down. Like it can feel like this behemothhic
Which will
task,
help you
like you
poop, by
said.
the way.
Exactly. And magnesium.
If you're
Magnesium's
one of
good
those
for pooping.
people who, it takes 3 days, slowing
Uh-huh.
down will help.
For the record, I'm not gonna like make this whole podcast episode about poop, but for the record, there was like many years of my life when I had no idea you were supposed to poop every day. I genuinely thought that everybody
You
pooped
are
every
not
3
alone.
days.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was a huge transformation for me. Anyway, segueing back to what I was talking about, I think it's like it can feel, like you said, a behemothhic task to, oh, well, now in addition to doing all the things you have to do as a mother, now you have to break generational trauma and all of that. It's really just every day, wake up, make the choice to be conscious, choose maybe one thing that you can do. And this is actually taught in like a lot of personal development people, just like habit stacking. And you start with one small thing that's really easy for you to do, and you make the commitment to do it every time, whether that's, you know doing a nice stretch when you get out of bed. Maybe that's the one thing you do.
Mhm.
Maybe it's drinking a glass of water, and you do it every single day until you don't have to think about it anymore. And then you add one more thing that you want to do. And I started with just waking up a little bit early. I've heard of people,
Mhm.
like, if you struggle with waking up, you just set your alarm clock back like 5 minutes every day. So it's that same kind of method. Start with one thing you can do each day that you can just commit to yourself. I'm going to do this today and every day that I can. Don't feel bad about it if you don't get it done one day. And that's how I've been able to develop really healthy routines in my life, is starting with one small thing each day and then stacking to it in a way that was easy and sustainable. And we see like people living their, these magnificent lives that you just wish you could live that, and it feels like I can't make all that happen. You don't have to, girl. Just one thing: wake up 5 minutes earlier tomorrow, or drink a glass of water first thing in the morning tomorrow, or do a nice big body stretch just like once or twice a day, even that. And then the more your soul feels like is exposed to that sort of like nurturing, like true self-care, the more it will beg you for it, and the easier it will become to call those things into your life. Like, do not sleep on how important one small change can make in your parenthood, in your motherhood, in yourself, in your relationship. One small change like can start the snowball that completely transforms your life into a different life than the one you had even a year ago.
Mm, wow. Perfect. It's so true. I teach about micro practices
Mm.
and sort of like even spontaneous practices when it comes to self-care for moms, which by the way, there will be plenty of opportunity to learn about that stuff in May for Mother's Day. We're going to be doing a lot of self-care for moms, different experiences. But yeah, it's important not to put so much pressure on yourself. And
Mhm.
it depends also who you're following on social media. Like, what are you
So
absorbing?
important.
What are you
So
absorbing that motherhood is supposed to look like?
mhm,
Just check in with yourself on that. We can do this on our own terms. And
mm,
self-care even happens on your own terms. I talk about that all the time where it's just like if yoga and meditation doesn't work for you, now granted, there are different styles of yoga and there are modifications for yoga. There's no right way to meditate. There are lots of different, breath work practices that you can try, but if that is 110% like not for you, then don't do it. Then
mhm,
find a self-care practice that works for you. It doesn't even matter what it is. It could be journaling, it could be doodling, it could be taking a walk outside, it could be, just being alone. Like, it could be making sure you get a morning poop. Like, it does not matter what it is, it matters what it's doing for you and how it
mhm.
feels in your body. So,
So
I
true.
just, like, wrote this a couple of days ago where it was just like, I think there's a lot right now, again, like, information for moms of just, like and I'm guilty of it too because obviously I have plenty of content out there that is about self-care and how you prioritize it as a mom and so on and so forth. So, hey, first and foremost, if it doesn't, take what feels good and leave the rest
Mhm,
100% no matter what, even of this episode that we're recording. But, be mindful of what you're being told is and is not self-care. For example, a lot of times it's like going to the grocery store alone or taking a shower is not self-care. And I understand that statement 100% because we deserve more. Like,
mhm,
we don't just deserve that as our self-care. We deserve more than that. We deserve to be able to incorporate more than that. I totally get that statement and that argument. However, if a hot shower after a long day with the kids feels like or while they're napping in the middle of the day or whatever it is, if it feels like a freaking release somatically in the body and like a damn spa experience, especially if you drizzle a little eucalyptus oil in there or whatever it is, if it feels like a release in your body and not like a mad dash to get clean and get out the door, then that is self-care for you. It
mhm,
doesn't matter what it is. It matters what it feels like. So don't let anybody tell you what your self-care is. You decide what your self-care is and
mm,
let it evolve depending on the day, depending on the season that you're in, depending on what is going on in your life. Like if the shit is hitting the fan and you're overwhelmed up to your eyes or you had a major, catastrophe happen, your self-care of your yoga practice, for example, might go out the window, and a self-soothing experience of getting on the phone with a really good friend or someone who can hold space for you needs to
Hmm.
maybe replace it for the day, or whatever it is. Let it evolve. Give yourself space for that. Okay, I have gone on long enough, but I love this because we are sitting here, giving, free coaching out, which is part of what I want to do. I want to make sure that, whoever's eyes and ears need to absorb this get something out of it. So I really appreciate you bringing it home, back home to the self-care, and I appreciate and acknowledge you for the work that you're doing overall with the collective. So I'm just going to remind everybody to go and check out Ellie's page, Goddess Mama Collective, which is on Facebook, right? So tell us anything else we need to know about where to find that.
Yeah, so you can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. That's where the most of like the community is that in a Facebook group called Goddess Mama Collective. You can also find the community at goddessmamacollective.com, and you can find just some information, sign up for the email list, and also on Instagram, Goddess Mama Collective. And then my personal Instagram is at the Ellie Element, and I kind of just do a combination of posting on both. I haven't got a good system down there yet, but I'm really excited. There's some amazing things coming. I'm working with a friend of mine is going to help me jump on board on my team. Her name's Abigail, and she's going to start helping with facilitating a lot more things, a lot more activities. So we're going to be doing some virtual yoga classes. We have a virtual book club. We're going to be doing some virtual breathwork classes. So no matter where you are, we do a lot of things local in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but no matter where in the world you are, there is still something for you. And again, that community, that co-regulation of people who understand you, who are welcoming you into with love and support, willing to give you, constructive advice and willing to receive constructive advice. If that's something that you've been looking for and you didn't even know how to maybe describe it, then I swear this is the place for you. This is an amazing community. We also have a chat group, so you can be like daily connected with people, kind of like in the more immediate now. So lots of resources. I really hope that you come join us. And I feel so strongly that if you are receiving this message and listening to this, that it was meant for you by the universe. That is the intention that I set for this podcast before I started recording, that this would reach the ears of everybody who needed it. So please come find us. You're welcome. And I can't wait to personally connect with you.
Beautiful. Yes, go find her. I was definitely drawn to you, so you got something there, and I feel
Thank you.
like it's just such good work you're doing. So keep
Thank
going.
you so much. I really appreciate it. And same goes to you. I love your page and your podcast, and love that whole self-care is so much not everything that it's made up to be on social media. That is such an important message to be speaking. So I love that you're sharing that, and I'm so grateful that you allowed me to have this platform to speak my truth and share what I'm doing, and love what you're sharing and what you're doing. And I'm really glad we were able to connect together. The online world can be a difficult place to navigate, but also so beautiful. And again, that's focusing on the positive, not the negative. There are so many incredible connections waiting for you on that screen, in addition to that negativity that you need to get away from.
Completely. I can't tell you how, I have a net positive of experiences, when I compare what negativity I've absorbed on social media, but then when I get deliberate about who I really want
Mm-hmm.
to see before my eyes and let enter my ears, things start to shift. So it's about that intention for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can do this again sometimes.
Would
Thank you
love
for
to.
listening, everybody. And if you liked this episode, I'm just going to remind you to either go on YouTube, Self Care is My Job channel, and go ahead and subscribe and like the video. You could listen to this podcast, is going to be uploaded within the next few days on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, all of the normal platforms. If you're loving it when you're listening to it on that platform, if you could rate, review, or like the episode, it would really help this message get to the ears that need to hear it. So I would appreciate it, and I appreciate you all for being a part of the Self Care is My Job community. We will talk soon. Thank you.